story follows a seemingly poor girl who is constantly bullied and humiliated by rich classmates at an elite school. She wore threadbare clothes, rode a broken bike, and became the laughingstock of her elite school. Every day, Lin Jiajia and her wealthy friends would mock her poverty, creating elaborate pranks to humiliate her in front of everyone. But what if I told you this bullied girl was actually worth billions? The truth behind Liu Jiaqi's facade will make you question everything you think you know about wealth, power, and the masks people wear in society. The transformation of Westlake Elite Academy's gymnasium was nothing short of extraordinary. Where just yesterday, students had played basketball and performed calisthenics, tonight, crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over what had become the epicenter of teenage social hierarchy. Lin Jiajia's 17th birthday celebration wasn't merely a party. It was a statement of power, wealth, and status that resonated through the cavernous space. Students filed in wearing outfits that could grace magazine covers, their designer labels visible enough to establish worth, yet subtle enough to maintain the illusion of effortless elegance. The live orchestra, positioned in the corner of the room, filled the air with classical music that provided the perfect soundtrack to the perfect social dance unfolding across the polished floor. Elaborate floral arrangements, imported from across continents, perfumed the air with exotic fragrances that masked the lingering scent of floor wax and teenage ambition. Chiaki herself stood near the entrance, a vision in an exclusive designer gown that hugged her figure perfectly. Her hair had been professionally styled, and diamonds glinted at her ears and throat. Birthday gifts from parents, eager to maintain their daughter's position at the pinnacle of Westlake. With each arrival, she accepted compliments and gifts with practiced grace, her smile revealing perfect teeth, while her eyes calculated the worth of each offering, and by extension, each relationship. The rhythm of the evening maintained its perfect tempo until Liu appeared at the entrance. The contrast couldn't have been more stark or deliberate. Where other guests sparkled with wealth, Chiaki wore a simple blue dress that, while clean and well-kept, clearly wasn't designed for such an extravagant occasion. Her hair was styled simply, and the only jewelry she wore was a modest pendant on a thin silver chain. The orchestra seemed to falter for a brief moment, as heads turned and whispers erupted throughout the gymnasium. "What is she doing here?" one girl murmured to her friend, making no effort to lower her voice as Chiaki passed. "Probably crashed the party," another responded with a snicker. "Security must be slipping." If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, a like and a subscribe would mean the world to me. It really helps the channel grow and keeps you in the loop for all the latest content. But these speculations were silenced when Jiajia herself approached Chiaki with an exaggerated smile. "You came. I wasn't sure you would." Her voice carried just enough to ensure nearby guests could hear. "I'm so glad you could experience a proper birthday celebration." The emphasis on proper wasn't lost on anyone present. This wasn't a friendly inclusion. It was theater, and everyone recognized their roles immediately. Chiajia's invitation had never been about kindness. It was a carefully calculated move to elevate herself by highlighting Jiaxia's otherness, creating entertainment at the expense of someone who didn't belong in their privileged circles. What no one expected, however, was Jiaxi's response. Rather than shrinking under the collective gaze or revealing discomfitor, she moved through the crowded room with unexpected poise. Her posture remained perfect, her steps measured and confident as she navigated the space as if she belonged there. There was something in her demeanor that seemed incongruent with her simple attire, a quiet assurance that made some of the onlookers exchange curious glances. "Thank you for inviting me, Chiaki," Chiaki said, her voice soft but clear. "I brought you something." From her modest purse, she extracted a small package wrapped in simple paper. Chiajia's smile faltered slightly as she accepted the gift, clearly expecting something she could later mock. "How thoughtful," she said, the words dripping with insincere sweetness. "Should I open it now?" When Chiaki nodded, Chiaki made a show of unwrapping the small box, ensuring nearby students could witness what would surely be an embarrassing gift. Inside was a small, carved wooden figurine that at first glance appeared unimpressive. Chiaki was already forming a dismissive comment when one of the parent chaperones, Mr. Chen, approached with unexpected interest. "Is that?" he began, leaning closer to examine the figurine. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition, perhaps even respect, before he caught himself and stepped back. "It's lovely," he finished simply, casting a curious glance at Chiaki before moving away. This momentary interaction didn't go unnoticed by Chiaki, whose eyes narrowed slightly before her smile returned. "Well, isn't this unique?" she said, setting the gift aside with barely concealed indifference. "Everyone, help yourselves to champagne. The non-alcoholic kind, of course," she added with a wink toward the chaperones. "We'll be having toast soon." As guests mingled and the evening progressed, Chiaki found herself isolated in the crowd. No one actively engaged with her, though many watched from a distance, curiosity mingling with condescension in their glances. She didn't attempt to force conversations or join groups that clearly shifted to exclude her. Instead, she observed the room with calm interest, occasionally sipping from a crystal flute and studying the artwork on the walls with more attention than it perhaps deserved. After an hour of this social isolation, Chiaki approached the orchestra conductor and whispered something that made him nod. The music stopped, and Chiaki tapped her glass delicately with a silver spoon, drawing everyone's attention. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "It means so much to have my closest friends here." Her emphasis on closest drew knowing smiles from the crowd. "Before we cut the cake, I thought it would be nice to hear from different perspectives about friendship and celebration." Her gaze fixed on Chiaki as my newest guest. "Perhaps you'd like to offer a toast?" The room fell into a hush thick with anticipation. This was the moment Chiaki had been orchestrating all evening. A public opportunity for Chiaki to embarrass herself in front of the elite crowd. Students exchanged looks of barely suppressed excitement, eager to witness the awkwardness that would surely follow. Some even raised their phones slightly, ready to capture whatever uncomfortable moment was about to unfold. Chiaki set her glass down carefully on a nearby table and walked toward the center of the room. The silence grew heavier with each step she took. When she reached Chiaki's side, she accepted the offered microphone with a small nod of thanks. For a moment, she surveyed the room, making eye contact with several students who quickly looked away. "In some cultures," she began, her voice clear and measured, "a birthday isn't just a celebration of having lived another year. It's a recognition of the journey one has taken and the growth one has achieved." Her diction was perfect, her phrasing eloquent without sounding rehearsed. "Chiaki, I wish you not just happiness in your 17th year, but wisdom to recognize true value when you see it, courage to question the foundations upon which you've built your world, and compassion that extends beyond the boundaries of convenience." She raised her glass in a graceful motion. "To growth, to wisdom, and to the journey ahead." The room remained silent for a heartbeat longer than was comfortable. This was not the fumbling, awkward toast everyone had expected. Instead, Chiaki had delivered something thoughtful and articulate, with subtle layers of meaning that left many guests shifting uncomfortably. Chiaki's face froze in a smile that didn't reach her eyes, as she accepted the microphone back with visible tension in her shoulders. "Well, that was certainly unique," she managed, attempting to regain control of the moment. "Now, who's ready for cake?" As the evening continued and attention shifted to other festivities, the whispers about Chiaki took on a different tone. Students who had previously dismissed her now watched with newfound curiosity. Her command of language and her composure under pressure suggested an education and social training that seemed at odds with her apparent economic status. The mysterious gift that had caught Mr. Chen's attention, her perfect posture in the face of obvious hostility, her eloquence when put on the spot. These details created a puzzle that didn't quite fit the narrative Chiaki had established. Behind those gleaming marble hallways of Westlake Elite Academy lay a battlefield where status determined survival. For Leo Chiaki, each day began with the same humiliating ritual that served as a public reminder of her place in the social hierarchy. While chauffeur-driven luxury vehicles lined the circular driveway, depositing students in designer uniforms untouched by the elements, Chiaki would appear on her rusted bicycle, the broken chain forcing her to dismount and walk the final stretch to the bike rack. This daily inconvenience, it was a spectacle carefully observed by those who defined themselves by what others lacked. "Look, Bicycle Girl is making her grand entrance," Chiaki would announce, timing her mockery for maximum audience effect. "Should we applaud the performance? She works so hard to show us how humble she is." The laughter that followed created an invisible barrier between Chiaki and everyone else, a wall reinforced daily through calculated exclusion tactics that had evolved into an art form among Westlake's elite. The school's physical environment itself, with its donor plaques, heritage wings named after prestigious families, and trophy cases celebrating generations of privileged achievers, served as a constant backdrop for the social stratification that played out in its corridors. Legacy students walked these halls with an entitled confidence born from knowing their surnames were etched into the very foundation of the institution. For them, Westlake wasn't merely a school, it was an inheritance, a birthright that came with obligations to maintain certain social boundaries. Chiaki's methods of isolation were as sophisticated as they were cruel. Her inner circle had perfected the synchronized chair shuffle, the practiced movement of shifting seats whenever Chiaki approached a table in the library or cafeteria. They maintained a running commentary on her homemade lunches, speculating loudly about ingredients and expressing exaggerated disgust at the aromas. "Do you think she even has a refrigerator at home?" one would ask. "That smell suggests otherwise," another would respond. Each comment calculated to be just loud enough for Chiaki to hear, without being overt enough to trigger intervention. The nicknames evolved with strategic precision. Charity Case gave way to Scholarship Pit, which transformed into the more insidious Leo Pathetic, a play on her surname that spread through social media groups where teachers couldn't monitor the cruelty. Rumors about her family circulated with embellishments that grew more outlandish with each retelling. Her father was a criminal hiding from authorities. Her mother cleaned houses for Westlake parents. Her home was actually a storage shed behind an apartment building. Most troubling was the complicity of the adults who should have been protecting vulnerable students. When Chiaki approached her literature teacher after finding her essay covered in insulting annotations that clearly weren't from the instructor, the teacher merely sighed and suggested she try harder to fit in. During a parent-teacher conference, an administrator referred to Chiaki as one of our diversity success stories within earshot of students, reinforcing her otherness while pretending to celebrate it. "We can't intervene in every social dynamic," the headmaster explained, when a rare concerned parent raised questions about the treatment of certain students. "These young people need to learn to navigate complex social environments. It prepares them for the real world." This philosophy of non-intervention conveniently aligned with the interests of wealthy donors, whose children were the primary perpetrators of the bullying. Despite this hostile environment, Chiaki demonstrated remarkable resilience in her daily routines. Lunchtime found her sitting alone near the large window overlooking the athletic fields, eating her homemade food methodically while completing additional reading for advanced classes, unlike other isolated students who hunched protectively over their meals. Chiaki maintained perfect posture, her back straight and chin slightly elevated, as though dining in the finest restaurant rather than enduring a daily gauntlet of whispers and stares. Her academic performance remained exemplary across all subjects, her hand consistently raised in class discussions, despite the eye-rolling her contributions inspired. When group projects were assigned, she worked independently, after being deliberately excluded, often producing work that surpassed the collective efforts of larger teams. This academic resilience only fueled resentment among those who viewed her success as an affront to the natural order they believed in, where social standing and academic achievement should correlate. The art exhibition incident revealed the lengths to which Chiaki's group would go to undermine Chiaki's accomplishments. After weeks of meticulous work on a portfolio piece, exploring themes of identity and belonging through mixed media, Chiaki left her nearly complete project in the designated storage area overnight. By morning, someone had systematically damaged key elements, tearing delicate paper components, smearing paint across precisely rendered details, and breaking the structural supports that held the piece together. "I'm disappointed, Leo," the art teacher said, examining the ruined work. "This isn't up to your usual standard. I expected more commitment to your craft." Despite Chiaki's quiet explanation that the work had been tampered with, no investigation followed. The failing grade was recorded without question, and photographs of the damaged piece circulated among students, with mocking captions suggesting this represented her true artistic abilities when not cheating on assignments. Throughout these torments, Chiaki's emotional control remained extraordinary. Where other victims of such treatment might lash out, break down, or simply disappear into themselves, she maintained a calm demeanor that suggested she possessed resources beyond what her tormentors could comprehend. She never raised her voice, never appealed to authority figures who had already demonstrated their indifference, and never altered her path to avoid confrontation. This composure wasn't mere stoicism. It suggested a person who understood something fundamental about her situation that others did not. The mystery deepened when a new transfer student named Minji attempted to befriend Chiaki after witnessing a particularly cruel incident in the school courtyard. Their conversation flowed easily as they discovered shared interests in international literature and classical music. For one afternoon, Chiaki seemed to relax slightly, her usual guardedness softening as they discussed favorite composers. The following morning, Minji approached with hesitation, explaining in hurried whispers that she had been warned to keep her distance. "They told me being seen with you would ruin my chances here," she admitted, unable to meet Chiaki's eyes. "I'm sorry, but my parents sacrificed everything for me to attend Westlake. I can't risk my position." The speed with which Chiaki's group had neutralized this potential friendship demonstrated how deeply entrenched the social hierarchy had become, and how effectively they maintained it through implied threats and social pressure. The most puzzling aspect of this situation remained Chiaki herself. With her academic excellence and evident intelligence, she could likely secure a transfer to another prestigious school, or even qualify for actual scholarship programs where her accomplishments would be celebrated rather than undermined. She remained at Westlake, enduring daily torment with a steadfastness that suggested purpose rather than powerlessness. This question found its partial answer one afternoon, when the campus had emptied following final bell. Believing herself alone in the eastern courtyard, Chiaki retrieved a sleek phone from a hidden compartment in her backpack, distinctly different from the outdated model she used publicly. Speaking in flawless, unaccented English, with a tone of authority that would have shocked her classmates, she discussed what sounded like business matters with someone she addressed as Director Jian. "The observation period continues as planned," she stated confidently. "I've gathered sufficient data on operational patterns and key personnel. Please inform the chairman that I'll provide a comprehensive assessment at the end of the semester." After a pause, she added with a touch of irony, "Yes, the environment is challenging, but illuminating. That's precisely the point of the exercise." As she ended the call, the setting sun caught the reflection of something metallic, partially visible, beneath her simple cotton shirt, a pendant or medallion on a chain that gleamed with the unmistakable luster of platinum. For that brief moment, with no audience to perform for, Chiaki stood with the natural authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. The bicycle girl, it seemed, was pedaling through Westlake's hostile territory by choice, rather than necessity, collecting information for purposes yet to be revealed. The platinum medallion wasn't Liu Jiaqi's only secret. Within Westlake's marble halls, the narrative of her supposed scholarship status had become accepted truth, whispered in corners and wielded like a weapon. Yet not once had the school issued an official announcement celebrating their diversity success story. The foundation of Jiaqi's social isolation, the very premise that justified every cold shoulder and cruel remark, had been built entirely on assumptions, interpretations, and strategic silence. Social hierarchies require simplicity. The wealthy students needed a neat explanation for why someone outside their circle existed in their space, and the scholarship story provided the perfect justification. It wasn't merely that Jiaqi arrived on a rusted bicycle or wore simpler clothes. It was the collective need to categorize her that made the rumor so resilient. Once labeled as other, no one bothered investigating further. The scholarship narrative spread through Westlake's gossip channels with remarkable efficiency, gaining credibility through repetition rather than verification. What made the deception so effective was Jiaqi's careful neutrality. When classmates referenced her scholarship directly, she neither confirmed nor denied it. Her responses remained measured, a slight redirection of the conversation, a polite nod, or sometimes just silence. This deliberate ambiguity allowed others to project their assumptions onto her blank canvas. Meanwhile, she focused on academic excellence, maintaining perfect scores and impeccable work that seemed to support the narrative of a grateful scholarship recipient, striving to prove her worth. But inconsistencies began surfacing like hairline cracks in porcelain. During advanced literature, Mr. Harlow brought in his collection of rare first editions, expecting to impress his privileged students. As the leather-bound volume circulated, Jiaqi handled a particularly valuable copy with familiar ease. When Mr. Harlow commented on its rarity, she casually mentioned seeing a similar edition at a private collection in Geneva, then added a technical observation about its binding technique that left the teacher momentarily speechless. "Miss Liu, that's remarkably astute," Mr. Harlow had said, his eyebrows rising slightly. "Most collectors twice your age wouldn't notice that particular detail." The comment might have faded into classroom background noise, except for the peculiar look that passed between them. Recognition, rather than surprise. Later that week, when discussing travel literature, Jiaqi referenced architectural details of a museum in Barcelona that wasn't on typical tourist itineraries. She described the private viewing rooms with the confidence of someone who had been read about them in books. Even more revealing was the business leadership seminar, where students presented case studies of family companies. When analyzing a complex corporate acquisition, Jiaqi dissected the strategy with precision that surpassed even the explanations offered by classmates whose parents had executed similar deals. She didn't simply understand the textbook principles. She spoke with the nuanced comprehension of someone who had observed these transactions from the inside. The acquiring company recognized that the target's apparent debt burden actually masked valuable intellectual property rights, she had explained. What looked like financial weakness was actually leverage positioning for innovation development. The business teacher had nodded with surprising deference. That's precisely the insight that made this particular acquisition famous in financial circles. Miss Liu, around midterm season, a subtle shift occurred in how certain faculty members addressed Jiaqi. The headmaster, Dr. Winters, typically maintained professional distance from most students, acknowledging them with a brisk nod in hallways. Yet when encountering Jiaqi, his demeanor changed perceptibly. His posture straightened, his tone softened, and on one noteworthy occasion, he actually inclined his head slightly. For someone who governed the school with aristocratic detachment, this behavior stood out like a flash of color against monotone. The most telling incident occurred during the major IT system upgrade. A temporary security breach exposed student financial records briefly on the network. Several students with technological aptitude noticed something odd. while other student profiles contained detailed payment histories and scholarship designations. Chiaki's file appeared under restricted access protocols. Unlike standard privacy settings that applied to all students equally, her information seemed protected by additional security layers, typically reserved for high-privacy individuals whose privacy required extraordinary measures. As these inconsistencies accumulated, Chiaki's curiosity transformed into obsession. Initially, she had targeted Chiaki simply because her apparent poverty made her an easy victim. Now, sensing mysterious depths beneath the surface, Chiaki began scrutinizing Chiaki's every movement with the intensity of someone who suspects she's been played. She started collecting observations in a dedicated notebook, documenting Chiaki's unexplained knowledge, her proposed reactions to humiliation, the deference certain adults showed her. There's something wrong with her story, Chiaki whispered to her inner circle during lunch period. Eyes narrowed as she watched Chiaki reading alone. No scholarship student knows about private art collections in Europe. And did you notice how Mr. Joe practically stands at attention when she asks questions in economics? The investigation escalated when Chiaki convinced a friend with computer skills to attempt accessing Chiaki's restricted school records, an effort that failed spectacularly and triggered a security alert that brought IT administrators running. The incident was quietly resolved, but Chiaki received a warning severe enough to temporarily halt her digital snooping. The breaking point came during the university admissions fair. Representatives from elite international universities had set up booths in the school gymnasium, and students circulated with their parents, collecting brochures and making connections. Chiaki moved through the crowd alone, engaging in substantive conversations with admissions officers, who seemed unusually attentive to her questions. Near the Harvard University booth, an alumni representative was discussing donation opportunities with several Westlake parents when Chiaki approached with a question about research opportunities. The representative glanced at her name tag, and his expression changed to one of recognition. "Liu, as in Leo Foundation?" he asked, a bit too loudly. "Your family's philanthropy has been instrumental to our East Asian Studies program. The Leo wing in our business school is still one of the most." A school administrator materialized with remarkable speed, smoothly interrupting. "Mr. Thornton, I believe the Chow family had questions about legacy admissions. Miss Liu, Dean Wilson was asking for you at the international programs table." The exchange lasted mere seconds, but the damage was done. Several students had overheard, including one of Chiaki's friends, who immediately texted her the information. The careful facade had developed its first significant crack, visible to anyone paying attention. For those observing these accumulating anomalies, the mystery deepened. If Liu Chiaki came from a family wealthy enough to have buildings named after them at Harvard, why would she arrive at school on a rusted bicycle? Why would she tolerate daily humiliation if she possessed the social capital to stop it instantly? The scholarship story that had seemed so convincing now appeared increasingly implausible against the mounting evidence of privilege, knowledge, and connections that extended far beyond Westlake's exclusive circles. As suspicions about Chiaki's true identity grew, Chiaki performed a morning ritual that had nothing to do with beauty and everything to do with survival. Each day before dawn, she would carefully extract designer clothes from her closet, items not purchased but borrowed through an elaborate network of cousins and acquaintances who still believed in her family's wealth. With practiced hands, she ran a small travel steamer over a silk blouse, erasing wrinkles while mentally calculating how many more wears she could squeeze from the garment before returning it. The spacious bedroom that had once showcased her family's prosperity now contained subtle signs of decline. Empty spaces on shelves where collectibles had been quietly sold. Photographs of vacations from 3 years ago, the last time her family could afford international travel. Her morning beauty routine had evolved beyond mere vanity Concealer now served to hide the scuff marks on her designer shoes, artfully applied to maintain the fiction of newness. In front of her vanity mirror, Chiaki practiced facial expressions. The slight raise of her eyebrow when assessing others, the casual dismissal in her smile when encountering something beneath her standards. These weren't just expressions, they were armor. "You are Lin Jiajia," she whispered to her reflection. "Everyone wants to be you, or be with you." The daily affirmation grew more necessary as her reality diverged further from her carefully maintained image. Downstairs, the once bustling staff had dwindled to a single housekeeper who came twice weekly. The marble foyer echoed with emptiness where art pieces had once stood. Her father's business, once the crown jewel of regional real estate development, teetered on the edge of bankruptcy after a series of failed investments and market downturns. The man who had once commanded boardrooms now spent his days behind closed. The previous night, Jiajian had stayed up until 2 a.m., photographing her limited edition handbags and listing them on exclusive resale platforms under an anonymous profile. Each item sold represented another month of maintaining appearances, another opportunity to arrive at school with a coffee that signaled prosperity, another chance to casually mention weekend plans at exclusive venues. She had become remarkably skilled at creating the illusion of spending money without actually spending it. Her mother entered without knocking, already dressed immaculately despite the early hour. "Are you joining the Chen family for their lake house weekend?" she asked, her tone making clear this wasn't really a question. The Chens controlled one of the region's largest investment firms, exactly the type of connection her mother believed might save them from financial ruin. "Their daughter mentioned you hadn't responded to the invitation." "I'll be there," Jiajia replied, hiding her panic. The weekend would require new outfits, appropriate gifts for the hosts, and spending money she simply didn't have. Later she would need to fabricate a family emergency or sudden illness to explain her absence. "Good. The Chen boy is starting at Harvard Business School next year. His father mentions it every chance he gets." Her mother lingered at the doorway. "Did you see Liu Jiaxi wearing the same sweater 3 days in a row? I don't understand why the school accepts these scholarship cases. They lower the entire institution's standard." The irony wasn't lost on Jiajia. Her mother's disdain for Jiaxi's perceived poverty mirrored exactly what would happen if their own financial reality became public knowledge. "I need to finish getting ready," she said, turning back to the mirror, unable to meet her mother's eyes. The psychological burden of maintaining dual identities, the wealthy socialite at school, and the increasingly desperate young woman at home, created a pressure that found release only when tormenting Liu Jiaqia. Each barb thrown at the quiet girl somehow eased Jiajia's own terror of exposure. If everyone focused on Jiajia's second-hand purchased anything new in months. At school, Jiajia's performance continued without a single missed beat. She laughed at the right moments, dismissed the right people, and held court at lunch with the calculated precision of a career politician. But maintaining the facade required increasingly desperate measures. When Meilin showed off her new gold bracelet in chemistry class, while helping Meilin with an experiment, she unclasped the bracelet, slipping it into her pocket, while pretending to help search for it on the floor. That evening, the bracelet joined other small items, a designer pen here, a silk scarf there, in a special box beneath her bed. Some were pawned immediately for cash. Others she kept to wear briefly before claiming they were new purchases. The guilt competed with her relief at having funds for another week of overpriced coffee and casual lunches that preserved her social standing. When an invitation arrived for a weekend shopping trip to the luxury boutiques downtown, Jiajia crafted an elaborate excuse about a family commitment. "My father's receiving an award at the Business Leaders Gala," she explained, knowing her friends wouldn't attend such events and couldn't verify her absence. In reality, she spent the weekend in her room, door locked, scrolling through social media and commenting on her friends' purchases as if she'd been there. Her resentment toward Li Jiaxi grew in direct proportion to her own precarious circumstances. How could someone with so little remain so composed? Why didn't Chiaki seem to care about the social rejection that terrified Chiaki? The question that kept her awake at night. What would happen to her if her friends discovered her family could no longer afford their membership at the country club, that their vacation home had been quietly sold to cover mounting debts? One evening, while searching her father's home office for items valuable enough to sell, Chiaki discovered a folder of business documents from the company's better days. Flipping through contracts and proposals, a name caught her eye: Leo International Holdings. The document detailed a failed partnership negotiation from years earlier, with her father's signature beside that of a Leo family representative. The letterhead featured a logo identical to the small design on the medallion Chiaki sometimes wore around her neck. The connection struck her with physical force. She sank into her father's chair, heart racing as pieces aligned in her mind. The scholarship student who spoke with unusual authority, whose knowledge surpassed that of students with private tutors, who remained unruffled by humiliation that would crush most teenagers. Could Chiaki be connected to the Leo conglomerate, the same business empire featured in financial magazines and global investment reports? Her hands trembled as she pulled up her phone to search Leo International Holdings. The results confirmed her worst fears. One of Asia's largest conglomerates, with holdings spanning technology, real estate, and education. Recent news mentioned the family's philanthropic focus on educational access, while maintaining their tradition of privacy. Who is she really? Chiaki whispered to the empty room, a cold realization washing over her. If Chiaki was connected to this family, then every mockery, every exclusion, every rumor Chiaki had spread had been witnessed by someone with the power to destroy her family completely. The room seemed to tilt as her breathing became shallow. The performance she'd maintained for months cracked under the weight of this new understanding. Chiaki had believed herself the queen manipulating a pawn, only to discover she might have been antagonizing the most powerful piece on the board. The auditorium hummed with tension as the day of the academic excellence competition arrived. After her disturbing revelation about Leo Chiaki's possible connections, Chiaki had transformed anxiety into calculated action. This wasn't merely another school event. It represented the battlefield where futures would be shaped, reputations cemented, and college admissions decided. Corporate representatives, university scouts, and influential business leaders filled the audience, their presence transforming teenage academic rivalry into something with real-world consequences. Perfect timing, Chiaki whispered to May and Vivian as they gathered in the preparation room. 3 hours earlier, they had executed what they considered a masterpiece of sabotage. Under the guise of helping the AV Club with technical arrangements, they had gained access to Chiaki's presentation files, replacing her meticulously prepared slides with subtly altered data, falsified research, and their crowning achievement, an embarrassing slide showing a photoshopped image of Chiaki captioned with the scholarship nicknames they'd created for her. "She'll be completely blindsided," May giggled nervously, glancing toward the door. "Did you see how calm she looked when she arrived? She has no idea what's coming." Chiaki nodded, satisfaction warming her chest. College recruiters don't forget public humiliations. After today, her academic reputation will be destroyed. The plan wasn't merely about humiliation. It was strategic elimination of competition. With Chiaki's path to prestigious university acceptances would be clearer. The competition's theme, innovative solutions for global markets, played perfectly into Chiaki's strengths, or so she believed. What Chiaki hadn't anticipated was the unusual security surrounding the event. 2 men in dark suits stood at the auditorium entrance, scanning attendees with an intensity that seemed excessive for a high school competition. In the front row, the CEO of Emerald Technologies, one of Asia's fastest-growing tech conglomerates, sat beside the dean of admissions from an Ivy League university. Both spoke peculiarly attentive when checking the competition roster, as contestants were called backstage for final preparations. Chiaki, watched Chiaki with predatory attention. The moment of discovery was coming, when Chiaki would review her presentation one final time before going on stage. Chiaki positioned herself to witness the inevitable panic, but panic never came. Chiaki opened her laptop, viewed the altered slides for exactly 47 seconds, then calmly closed the device. Her expression remained unchanged as she straightened her simple blazer and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. No frantic attempts to fix the sabotaged presentation, no desperate pleas to the competition organizers, nothing that matched the reaction Chiaki had anticipated with such relish. "Something's wrong," Chiaki whispered to Vivian. "She should be falling apart right now." When Chiaki's name was announced, she walked to the podium with the measured confidence of someone entering their own living room. The audience rustled with attention, particularly the front row of business representatives. The Emerald Technologies CEO leaned forward slightly, his expression not of curiosity but expectation. "Distinguished judges, honored guests, fellow students," Chiaki began, her voice clear and resonant without the microphone's assistance. "Today, I'll be discussing innovative market approaches for sustainable technology implementation in developing economies." Chiaki gripped her armrest as Chiaki proceeded without referencing her slides at all. Instead of the stumbling, humiliated performance she had engineered, the audience witnessed an extraordinary display of cognitive mastery. Chiaki delivered a flawless 30-minute presentation, entirely from memory, weaving complex economic theories with specific market applications, citing research studies with precise statistical findings, and analyzing implementation strategies with the nuance of a seasoned business consultant. The Kaiserman method of market penetration fails in these regions, not because of its fundamental premises, but because it doesn't account for the 7 critical cultural variables I've outlined, Chiaki explained, discussing advanced business concepts that weren't taught until graduate-level courses. She referenced obscure economic journals and cited recent market research that even the corporate representatives seemed impressed to hear mentioned. The sabotaged slides remained untouched, advancing automatically behind her, a pathetic backdrop to a performance that demonstrated knowledge far beyond what anyone had expected from a high school student. When the embarrassing photoshopped image appeared, Chiaki didn't falter for a moment. Instead, she continued her analysis with such compelling insight that few in the audience even noticed the childish attempt at humiliation playing out behind her. Most striking was the reaction of the judging panel. While clearly impressed, they didn't seem surprised by Chiaki's extraordinary capabilities. The Emerald Technologies CEO nodded occasionally, as if confirming something he already knew, rather than discovering new talent. The university representatives exchanged glances that suggested recognition rather than discovery. When Chiaki concluded, the applause began with the front row of business leaders and cascaded through the auditorium. Students who had previously ignored or mocked her stared in stunned silence at the standing ovation she received. Chiaki remained frozen in her seat, the bitter taste of failure spreading through her mouth as she realized her plan had backfired catastrophically. The announcement of results felt like a formality. When Chiaki was declared the winner, she accepted the crystal trophy with the same quiet composure she had maintained throughout the competition. The corporate sponsors crowded around her, exchanging business cards and speaking in tones too low for others to hear, treating her with the deference usually reserved for established professionals rather than students. As Chiaki made her way through the congratulatory crowd, she paused momentarily beside Chiaki's seat. With the trophy balanced elegantly in one hand, she leaned down until her lips were inches from Chiaki's ear. "I know it was you," she whispered, her voice carrying no anger, only calm certainty. "And soon you'll understand why that was a mistake." The simple statement carried the weight of promised consequences rather than emotional reaction. Chiaki straightened and continued through the crowd, leaving Chiaki frozen in place. the blood draining from her face as she realized she had miscalculated in ways she was only beginning to comprehend. The aftermath of the competition rippled through the school's social ecosystem. Students who had witnessed Chiaki's performance began questioning the scholarship narrative, noticing details they had previously ignored. Her perfect diction, her sophisticated understanding of global economics, the way certain faculty members addressed her with unusual respect. For Chiaki, the competition marked the beginning of a new reality. She had entered the event believing herself the queen manipulating a pawn, only to discover she might have been antagonizing someone with significantly more power than she had imagined. The document she had discovered linking Lu International Holdings to her father's business took on new, terrifying significance. That evening, Chiaki's phone chimed with a notification. A new email had arrived from the university she had dreamed of attending since childhood. The subject line read simply, "Regarding your application status." Her hand trembled as she opened it, wondering if Chiaki's whispered promise was already being fulfilled. The university email occupied Chiaki's mind for days, but what she witnessed behind the gymnasium transformed her understanding of Liu Chiaki completely. For all her obsessive documentation and suspicions about the quiet scholarship student, nothing prepared Chiaki for the sleek black sedan with diplomatic plates that now appeared each afternoon at precisely 5:30 p.m. The car's polished exterior reflected the setting sun as it waited silently at the school's service entrance, a calculated distance from the main doors where most parents collected their children. Chiaki had stayed late that Tuesday, claiming to need extra time in the chemistry lab, while actually planning to gather more evidence for her growing investigation into Chiaki's contradictions. As she peered around the corner of the athletic building, Chiaki watched a man in an impeccably tailored suit emerge from the vehicle, scanning the perimeter with practiced precision before opening the rear passenger door. The man's posture and alertness suggested professional security training rather than mere chauffeur duties. Curiosity overwhelmed caution as Chiaki crept closer, hiding behind a row of ornamental shrubs that lined the service road. From this vantage point, she could observe without being detected, her phone camera ready to document whatever unfolded. The security man spoke quietly into a discreet communication device on his wrist, his eyes never ceasing their methodical survey of the surroundings. At exactly 5:45 p.m., Liu Chiaki emerged from the side entrance, her simple backpack slung over one shoulder. The transformation that occurred next left Chiaki momentarily breathless. The security personnel immediately straightened to attention, and the driver, a second man who had remained at the wheel, stepped out and bowed slightly as Chiaki approached. Most shocking was how the first security man addressed her, speaking in a foreign language but with unmistakable deference, as he said what sounded like, "Uncle Lin Chiaki has arrived." Chiaki's fingers trembled as she captured the scene on her phone, the respectful bow, the formal address, the way Chiaki nodded with the casual acknowledgement of someone accustomed to such treatment. The stark contrast between the girl who pedaled to school on a rusted bicycle and this figure of quiet authority, entering a vehicle worth more than most teachers' annual salaries, created a dissonance that Chiaki couldn't reconcile. When Chiaki settled into the car's leather interior, Chiaki glimpsed a second security professional already seated inside, confirming this wasn't merely luxury transportation, but a comprehensive security detail, the kind reserved for those whose names appeared in international headlines or whose wealth required constant protection. The vehicle departed with silent efficiency, leaving Chiaki staring after diplomatic plates that granted immunities and privileges beyond ordinary citizens. By the following morning, Chiaki had shared the photos with her inner circle, their group chat exploding with theories and exclamations. "I told you there was something off about her," Mei Ling typed. "My father says diplomatic plates are only for foreign dignitaries or high-ranking officials," added Tao, whose parent worked in government relations. As the images circulated beyond their immediate group, The school buzzed with speculation. She could be in witness protection, suggested one student during lunch. Maybe she's political royalty from another country, theorized another. The theories grew more elaborate with each retelling, transforming Chiaki from scholarship student to international woman of mystery virtually overnight. Jiajia observed with calculated satisfaction as her revelation undermined the sympathy that had recently begun to surround Chiaki following her impressive academic competition victory. The school's response came swiftly and unexpectedly. By Thursday morning, Assistant Principal Zhao intercepted several students discussing the mysterious car, confiscating phones, and issuing stern warnings about privacy violations and unauthorized photography on school grounds. This matter involves confidentiality protocols beyond standard student privacy regulations, she stated with unusual firmness. Further discussion or distribution of these images will result in serious disciplinary action. The administrative intervention only intensified curiosity, particularly when students noticed the new security procedures implemented the very next day. Men in nondescript professional attire began conducting subtle sweeps of the school grounds each morning, before Jiaxia's arrival and again before her departure. They never approached her directly, but maintained positions that provided clear sightlines to all entrances and exits, their communication devices visible only to the most observant eyes. During afternoon study hall, Jiajia overheard two teachers speaking in hushed tones near the faculty lounge. The protocols came directly from the board chairman, one whispered. Apparently, there's been a security assessment, and we'll treat this as a matter of international significance. The second teacher nodded knowingly. I heard the family made certain arrangements when she enrolled. Complete confidentiality, no special treatment, minimal public exposure. When Jiajia surreptitiously followed Jiaxi to the library the following day, she witnessed another perplexing scene. The normally reticent librarian, Mrs. Qian, immediately abandoned her cataloging task when Jiaxi approached, personally escorting her to a private study room, typically reserved for visiting scholars. The door remained partially open, but the deference shown by the usually strict librarian added another layer to the growing mystery. The diplomatic vehicle continued its daily appearances, now drawing small clusters of students who found excuses to linger near windows overlooking the service entrance. Carefully timed bathroom breaks and extended locker visits allowed glimpses of the security detail that had become a source of fascination across all grade levels. Teachers became increasingly vigilant about keeping students away from certain areas after school hours, further fueling speculation. By the following Monday, Jiaxi could no longer ignore the transformed atmosphere around her. As she entered her advanced economics class, three students who had previously participated in Jiaxi's exclusion tactics approached her desk with newfound interest. "Is it true your family has diplomatic immunity?" asked one girl, who had never directly spoken to Jiaxi before. Another student leaned in, lowering his voice. "My father works with international business delegations, and he says only families with significant government connections get those kinds of plates and security." Jiaxi regarded them with the same composed expression she had maintained through months of isolation and mockery. "My family values privacy above displays of wealth," she replied simply, neither confirming nor denying their assumptions. "I'd rather focus on today's lesson than my transportation arrangements." The non-answer left them visibly frustrated, but unable to press further without appearing crudely direct. The final confirmation that the faculty had been briefed about Jiaxi's true circumstances came during world history later that week. Mr. Donovan, while returning graded papers, approached Jiaxi's desk and momentarily slipped in his practiced informality. "Excellent analysis as usual, Miss Leo," he said, adding the formal address that was never used with other students. He immediately flushed, glancing around to see if others had noticed his deviation from the casual Jiaxi he typically used. Several students exchanged meaningful looks, adding this slip to their growing collection of evidence. As theories continued circulating throughout the school, Jiajia found herself increasingly isolated within the very gossip networks she had initiated. Her friends now directed their attention toward cultivating proximity to Jia rather than supporting Jia's ongoing investigation. The social calculation was clear. If Jiaxi possessed connections powerful enough to warrant diplomatic transportation and professional security, she represented a potential social alliance far more valuable than Jia's crumbling facade of wealth. During their English literature discussion that Friday, Jiaxi contributed thoughtfully to the analysis of power dynamics in Shakespearean tragedies, her insights drawing nods of approval from Ms. Winters. As class ended, Jiaxia watched with mounting frustration as classmates who had once participated in Jiaxi's systematic exclusion now lingered hopefully near her desk, offering study partnerships and weekend invitations that Jiaxi completely but firmly declined. As Jiaxi declined yet another insincere invitation, the school's administrative staff was finalizing preparations for an event that would shatter Jia's remaining illusions. Parent-teacher conferences at Easton Academy weren't just academic reviews. They were carefully orchestrated displays of power, where even the seating arrangements revealed who truly controlled the corporate world beyond these walls. 3 days before the conferences, Easton Academy underwent a subtle transformation. Maintenance staff polished brass nameplates until they gleamed like gold, and fresh floral arrangements appeared at strategic points throughout the administrative wing. Security personnel in tailored suits, distinctly different from the school's regular guards, conducted thorough sweeps of the conference rooms, installing temporary surveillance equipment and checking sight lines from V. Zheng. The administrative director reviewed a color-coded schedule with unusual precision. The Liu family representatives will require the Chancellor's suite, she instructed her staff. Ensure the private entrance remains secured and reroute all foot traffic from the East Corridor during their scheduled appointment. She tapped a folder bearing a discreet red marker. Headmaster Chen will personally oversee these arrangements. When Jiajia's parents announced their intention to attend her conference, cold dread spread through her body. "You can't come," she protested, desperation edging her voice. "Everyone sends their assistants. It's how things are done here." Her father's weary eyes met hers across their dining table. Once an imported Italian marble masterpiece, now bearing water rings and scratches they could no longer afford to repair. "We have no assistants to send," he replied quietly, "and I need to speak with your teachers about scholarship opportunities. Our circumstances have changed, Jia. It's time to face reality." The word haunted Jia as she watched her mother press their only remaining presentable clothes the night before the conference. Their car, a domestic model now 8 years old, would be painfully conspicuous in Easton's circular driveway, where chauffeurs typically idled in vehicles worth more than their entire apartment. On conference day, Jia huddled in the library, unable to bear witnessing her parents' arrival. Through the window, she observed a procession of luxury vehicles delivering parents and professional representatives. At precisely 3:15 p.m., something unexpected occurred. The security detail at the school's private rear entrance suddenly tripled, and traffic was diverted from the approaching street. A convoy of 3 identical black vehicles, with discreet diplomatic flags, approached. Unlike the ostentatious arrivals of other wealthy families, these cars bore no visible branding, their windows tinted to perfect opacity. 6 security personnel emerged first, establishing a perimeter, before a slender woman in a tailored gray suit exited the middle vehicle, flanked immediately by 2 men carrying sleek leather portfolios. "That's for Liu Jiaxi," whispered a student beside Jia. "My dad says her family never appears in person, just sends their executive team." "Executive team?" Jia echoed, confusion momentarily overriding her own concerns. "Legal counsel, chief security officer, financial directors. My father tried networking with them last year and got completely shut down." The student's eyes remained fixed on the procession. "Dad says whoever Liu Jiaxi really is, she's completely out of our league." Jia watched as Headmaster Chen personally greeted the delegation, his typical authoritative demeanor replaced by what could only be described as deferential respect. The woman in the gray suit nodded briskly as the headmaster led them through the private entrance, bypassing the main reception area, where other parents waited, forcing herself to attend her own conference. Chiaki arrived to find her parents already seated in the humanities classroom, her father's worn suit cuffs carefully arranged to hide their fraying edges. Miss Winters, her English literature teacher, was reviewing Chiaki's file with a smile that seemed to freeze when she noted the family's appearance. Chiaki has always been a socially influential student, Ms. Winters began, carefully, selecting her words with newfound precision. Though recently we've noticed some behavioral concern regarding her interactions with certain classmates. Her father nodded, seemingly unaware of the subtle shift in the teacher's tone. She's always been popular, takes after her mother that way. The conference continued with surface-level pleasantries, but Chiaki detected something in Ms. Winters' manner, a guardedness that hadn't existed before. When they moved to Mr. Donovan's classroom for mathematics, the same cautious assessment occurred, with her typically effusive teacher suddenly measured in his praise. As they crossed the central courtyard toward their final appointment, Chiaki felt the humiliation she'd so carefully avoided burn across her face. Her parents' dated clothes and humble demeanor had already been noted by several classmates' families, their whispers following her like shadows. Then she saw him, the man exiting the economics department with Leo Chiaki's delegation, tall, with immaculate posture and the confident air of someone who controlled vast resources. He carried a leather portfolio embossed with a distinctive gold emblem. Her father stopped mid-step, color draining from his face. "Mr. Lin," the man acknowledged with a slight nod. "I believe we met during the acquisition negotiations last month. The transition team speaks highly of your cooperation." "Mr. Zhao," her father replied, his voice barely audible. "I didn't realize you were involved with the school." The man's smile revealed nothing. "I represent various Leo family interests. Educational investments are among our priorities." His gaze shifted briefly to Chiaki, then back to her father. "We should discuss your daughter's academic future sometime, perhaps at our offices." After they parted ways, Chiaki noticed a business card on the ground, heavy cardstock with embossed lettering that caught the light. She picked it up reflexively, turning it over to read, "Edward Zhao, Executive Director of Acquisitions, Leo International Holdings." Her fingers trembled as the pieces aligned in her mind. The mysterious security details, the diplomatic plates, the deference from teachers, all connected to the conglomerate that had recently acquired her father's failing business. During their final conference, Chiaki barely heard the science teacher's comments about her declining performance. Instead, she watched her parents' expressions, noting how her mother's hands twisted nervously in her lap whenever Leo Chiaki's name arose. "Miss Lin shows great potential," the teacher was saying, "though her focus has seemed divided this semester. Perhaps she could benefit from the peer mentoring program. Leo Chiaki has volunteered to assist struggling students." Her mother's sharp intake of breath was almost imperceptible, but Chiaki caught it, along with the quick, warning glance her father sent across the table. As they departed the school grounds in their modest car, the silence between them stretched unbearably, until they believed Chiaki had fallen asleep in the back seat. "We can't afford to antagonize them," her father finally whispered. "The Leo family owns everything now. Our former company, our mortgage, even the loans for Chiaki's tuition. One word from them could destroy what little we have left." "How could we have known?" her mother replied. "All this time, Chiaki has been tormenting the daughter of the most powerful family in Asia." "The daughter," her father corrected, his voice hollow with realization. "The heir. Liu Chiaki is the granddaughter of Liu Weiming. The newspapers call him the kingmaker of modern China. Their holding company doesn't just own businesses, they control entire markets." Chiaki's blood turned to ice as the magnitude of her situation crystallized. The quiet girl she had systematically tormented for months wasn't merely wealthy, She represented a dynasty with the power to determine her family's entire future. Every mocking comment, every social exclusion, every deliberate humiliation she had orchestrated against Chiaki now loomed as potential justification for her family's complete financial destruction. Karma rarely delivers its lessons through academic syllabi, but the morning after Chiaki's devastating realization, Mr. Vaughn's economics class would prove the exception. What could be more fitting than forcing a fallen social queen to collaborate with the very heiress whose empire now controlled her family's fate? As Mr. Vaughn announced project partnerships, matching Liu Chiaki with Lin Jianya, he had no idea he was creating not just a business proposal, but the final boardroom where Chiaki's true reckoning would unfold. For this semester's capstone project, Mr. Vaughn explained, while distributing the assignment guidelines, you'll develop a comprehensive business proposal, analyzing an existing corporation's market strategy and suggesting innovations. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, scanning the room. I've paired students with complementary strengths to simulate real-world collaborative environments. The classroom fell silent as he read the partnerships aloud. When he announced Chiaki and Lin Jianya, several students exchanged knowing glances. Mr. Vaughn, unaware of the charged history between them, continued explaining the project parameters, oblivious to the tension that had instantly crystallized in the air. Chiaki's face flushed as she stared at the assignment sheet, refusing to look in Chiaki's direction. Her mind raced with conflicting impulses, the habitual urge to assert dominance, battling with her new awareness of Chiaki's true position in the world. When the bell rang, she approached Chiaki with uncharacteristic hesitation. We should establish a work schedule, Chiaki said, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. My house isn't available, so we'll need to work at school or… She let the sentence hang, unwilling to invite herself to the Leo residence. Chiaki nodded, her expression betraying nothing. The library has private study rooms. We can start tomorrow after classes. Their first work session began with Chiaki attempting to seize control of the project, a reflexive assertion of her diminishing power. I think we should analyze Chen Technologies, she suggested, referencing a company owned by one of her remaining social allies. Their recent expansion into Southeast Asia provides an excellent case study. Chiaki listened patiently before responding. An interesting choice, but their market penetration strategy lacks sophistication. She opened her laptop to display a comprehensive analysis of international market entry protocols. Their approach ignores cultural integration factors and regulatory compliance variations across ASEAN countries. Chiaki stared at the screen, recognizing analysis that went beyond textbook theories to insider knowledge. The terms Chiaki used reflected executive-level strategic thinking, rather than student comprehension. How do you know all this? Chiaki asked, before she could stop herself. My family has interests in several markets, Chiaki replied with deliberate vagueness. I've observed these dynamics firsthand during quarterly performance reviews. The casual reference to her family's business holdings hung in the air between them. Chiaki's hands trembled slightly as she turned a page in her notebook, struggling to maintain her composure. Perhaps we should consider Leo International Holdings instead, Chiaki suggested, her voice carrying just a hint of irony. I have access to insider information that would make our analysis particularly robust. Chiaki's pen froze mid-sentence. Wouldn't that be… She hesitated, searching for the right words. A conflict of interest? At all, Chiaki replied. I can provide insights into their strategic decision-making that would make our project exceptional. She met Chiaki's eyes with unwavering calm. Unless you'd prefer another company. The question was loaded with unspoken meaning. Chiaki recognized she was being tested. Her response would reveal whether she was willing to acknowledge the truth hovering between them. Leo International would be fine, Chiaki conceded, her voice barely audible. Over the next 2 weeks, their research sessions became increasingly uncomfortable for Chiaki as she discovered the true extent of the Leo family's global influence. What had been abstract knowledge from her father's worried conversations materialized into concrete data before her eyes. The Leo conglomerate extended beyond Asia into Europe, Africa, and the Americas, with holdings in technology, real estate, education, and sustainable energy. The more they researched, the more Chiaki recognized patterns that pointed to Chiaki's intimate knowledge of the corporation's inner workings. She didn't cite reports or reference analysts. She explained decisions as if she had been in the room when they were made. The acquisition of Meridian Technologies wasn't primarily about their patent portfolio, Chiaki explained during their third session. It was about securing talent. The Leo philosophy values human capital above all other assets. Chiaki nodded mechanically, no longer attempting to contribute meaningful insights. The dynamic between them had shifted dramatically. Chiaki now took notes while Chiaki directed their analysis. Her deference, a stark reversal of their previous relationship. In a transparent attempt to repair what could not be undone, Chiaki began adopting an artificially friendly tone. "Your analysis is brilliant, Chiaki. We're definitely getting an A on this project." Her forced enthusiasm rang hollow against the weight of their history. Chiaki acknowledged these overtures with polite detachment, neither encouraging nor rejecting the sudden friendliness. Her responses remained professional and focused exclusively on their work, creating a one-way mirror that reflected Chiaki's desperate attempts at reconciliation while revealing nothing of her own thoughts. During their practice presentation the following week, Chiaki incorporated a section on corporate acquisition strategies that sent chills down Chiaki's spine. Leo International is particularly notable for their approach to failing businesses, Chiaki explained, making direct eye contact with Chiaki. Unlike typical hostile takeovers that strip assets and discard management, the Leo method involves extensive investigation into why the business failed, including the character and decisions of its leadership. Chiaki's throat constricted as Chiaki continued. They believe that understanding the human factors behind business failure provides essential insights. Before finalizing acquisitions, they conduct thorough assessments of key personnel to determine who contributed to the decline and who might still add value. The clinical precision with which Chiaki described this process made it clear she wasn't simply analyzing corporate strategy. She was describing what had happened to Chiaki's family business. With each slide, Chiaki's gaze returned to Chiaki, letting the implications sink in without needing to state them explicitly. After completing their run, they sat in silence, organizing their notes. The emptying library provided a moment of privacy that Chiaki finally used to address what had remained unspoken between them. "Your family business wasn't acquired because of its value," she said quietly, closing her laptop, "but because I wanted to understand who was tormenting me and why." Chiaki's head snapped up, her carefully maintained facade crumbling. "What are you saying? When I first noticed your behavior, I was curious about what drove such calculated cruelty," Chiaki continued, her voice steady. "My grandfather taught me that understanding people's motivations is essential in both business and life. So I asked our acquisitions team to investigate your family's company." The revelation hit Chiaki like a physical blow. All this time, while she'd believed herself the tormentor, she had actually been under observation, a subject in a study of human behavior conducted by the very person she'd targeted. "You knew?" Chiaki whispered, her voice breaking. "About my family's situation? About everything?" "I knew your father's business was failing before you did," Chiaki confirmed. "What I didn't know was whether your cruelty came from insecurity or genuine malice. I wanted to understand the person behind the behavior before deciding what to do about your family's future." The full implications of this power reversal washed over Chiaki Every mockery, every exclusion, every humiliation she had orchestrated had been witnessed not by a helpless scholarship student, but by someone who held her family's financial fate in her hands. And all along, Chiaki had been quietly gathering data, assessing her character through her actions rather than her words. While private revelations between two individuals echo through empty hallways, public ones resonate across crowded amphitheaters, forever altering the landscape of shared understanding. 342 students, 58 faculty members, and nearly 100 distinguished alumni gathered in Westlake's Grand Auditorium for the annual Founders' Day ceremony, entirely unaware they were about to witness the most significant power shift in the school's century-long history. The auditorium hummed with anticipation as students filed in wearing their formal uniforms, pressed and perfect. Subtle status markers differentiated the attendees, despite the uniformity limited edition watches, custom-tailored blazers with superior stitching, and handcrafted leather shoes that whispered wealth without shouting it. Marble podiums flanked a stage adorned with fresh orchids, their delicate blooms arranged before an enormous projected image of the school's crest. Alumni in bespoke suits clustered near the front rows, their quiet conversations punctuated with knowing laughter as they recalled their own school days, while eyeing potential legacy admissions among the current student body. The air felt charged, electric with possibility, and the particular weight of tradition that elite institutions cultivate with practiced precision. This year marks a special milestone in Westlake's history, Headmaster Green announced from the podium, his voice carrying through the state-of-the-art sound system. We will be recognizing a family whose contributions have shaped not just our physical campus, but the very spirit of excellence we embody. Their philanthropy has remained largely anonymous at their request for 3 generations, but today we finally honor them publicly with our Lifetime Benefactor Award. Throughout the audience, whispers erupted like brushfire. Student phones illuminated faces as messages flew between friend groups, speculating about this mysterious benefactor family. In the third row, Chiaki sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, face a composed mask that revealed nothing of what was to come. 7 rows behind her, Chiaki clutched a manila folder containing what she believed was irrefutable evidence. Documents she'd painstakingly gathered showed inconsistencies in Chiaki's scholarship story. For weeks, she'd compiled photographs of the mysterious car, notes about faculty deference, and snippets of overheard conversations. Chiaki had planned this moment meticulously. When Green announced the Leo family representatives, she would stand and expose Chiaki's deception about being related to the wealthy Leo dynasty. It would be her triumphant return to social prominence, the ultimate vindication. Without further delay, Green continued, adjusting his glasses with a slight tremor in his hands. I invite the current representative of the Liu family enterprise to join me on stage to accept this long-overdue recognition. The auditorium fell silent as eyes scanned the front rows, where most VIPs were seated. A moment passed, then another. Green smiled knowingly as the tension built. Then, from the unremarkable third row, Chiaki stood with fluid grace. The collective gasp was audible as Chiaki walked toward the stage, no longer hunched to appear smaller or moving with the self-conscious gait of someone trying to avoid attention. Her posture now reflected years of etiquette training, her stride confident and measured, as if walking the corridors of her family's corporate headquarters rather than the pathway between auditorium seats. Chiaki's folder slipped from her fingers, papers scattering across the polished floor as realization crashed over her. The whispers around her evolved into a dull roar as students connected moments from the past months, the diplomatic plates, the security details, the teacher's deference. With the girl now ascending the stage steps, at the podium, she accepted the Crystal Award with a polite nod before turning to face her peers. For the first time since arriving at Westlake, she allowed herself to be fully seen. Thank you, Dr. Green, distinguished faculty, and fellow students. She began, her voice steady and clear. The Leo family has supported Westlake Academy for 3 generations because we believe education is the foundation of character. My grandfather, Leo Wei Ming, taught me that wealth without wisdom is meaningless, and status without substance is hollow. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the audience, momentarily resting on Chiaki's pale face before continuing. I turned 16. My grandfather presented me with a challenge that generations of Leo heirs have faced: to live among peers without the shield of our family name or the assumption of privilege, not as a deception, but as an opportunity to understand who I am, beyond what my family has built, and to learn how people behave when they believe no one of consequence is watching. Murmurs rippled through the audience as students recalled their interactions with the girl they'd dismissed, mocked, or simply ignored. Faculty members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, remembering incidents they'd overlooked or minimized. During my time here, I've witnessed extraordinary kindness from unexpected sources, and cruelty from those who present themselves as leaders. I've seen how wealth and status can either elevate character or corrupt it entirely. These lessons cannot be taught in boardrooms or corporate retreats. They must be experienced firsthand. Chiaki's voice remained even, neither accusatory nor bitter, yet her words carried undeniable weight. In the audience, several students lowered their heads, while others glanced nervously at Chiaki, whose social power had evaporated in the space of minutes. The Leo family believes that true privilege carries responsibility. Today, I'm announcing the establishment of the Character and Integrity Scholarship Fund. This endowment will provide full tuition for students who demonstrate exceptional kindness, ethical leadership, and moral courage, regardless of their financial background. She paused, allowing the significance to settle across the auditorium. Recipients will be selected through a blind process that evaluates actions rather than achievements, compassion rather than connections. Because at Leo International we understand that how someone treats others when they believe they have nothing to gain reveals more about their potential than any test score or family pedigree. The auditorium erupted in applause, tentative at first, then building to thunderous approval as alumni and faculty rose to their feet. Through the standing ovation, Chiaki remained composed, neither reveling in vindication nor exhibiting the false modesty of practiced philanthropy announcements. From her seat, Chiaki watched as her former friends angled themselves toward Chiaki, their allegiance shifting with the wind of fortune. The realization crystallized with terrifying clarity. The girl she had tormented for months now controlled not just her family's financial survival, but held authority over the institution that represented Chiaki's only path to redemption. Years of calculated social engineering had been rendered meaningless in minutes. As the ceremony concluded, students filed out in a buzz of excited conversation, recalibrating their understanding of the school's hierarchy. Faculty members approached Chiaki with newfound attention, their previous indifference transformed into eager recognition. The social order had not merely shifted, it had been fundamentally restructured around authentic values, rather than performed wealth. Chiaki remained seated long after the auditorium had emptied, staring at the scattered papers that had been meant to fuel her triumph. Each document now served as evidence, not of Chiaki's deception, but of her own moral failure. The carefully constructed social identity she had maintained through increasingly desperate measures lay in ruins around her. Chiaki's social collapse wasn't just a personal catastrophe. It triggered a complete reorganization of Westlake's unwritten hierarchies that had governed student interactions for decades. What happens when the currency of popularity suddenly changes from designer labels to genuine character, and those who've invested everything in the former find themselves utterly bankrupt in the latter? The transformation was swift and merciless. Overnight, former members of Chiaki's inner circle scattered like startled birds, each desperate to distance themselves from any association with her documented cruelty. The cafeteria tables that once operated as exclusive territories under Chiaki's reign now reshuffled their occupants based on a new metric of status. Students who had never spoken directly to Chiaki suddenly discovered urgent academic questions that required her personal insight, approaching her with manufactured smiles and rehearsed compliments. Through it all, Chiaki maintained her routine with unwavering consistency. She still arrived on her bicycle, politely declined special accommodations from administrators, and focused intensely during classes. The only observable difference was the crowd that now formed around her, vying for attention she had never sought. With quiet grace, she acknowledged each person equally, refusing to establish a new hierarchy with herself at its center. From across the courtyard, as she observed Gia eating alone, her lunch spread before her untouched, as she stared at her phone, pretending to be absorbed in something important. The parallel wasn't lost on Gia. The empty chairs surrounding Gia mirrored her own previous isolation, though the causes couldn't have been more different. Where Chiaki had been ostracized for perceived poverty, Gia now faced rejection for her exposed character flaws and the subsequent collapse of her manufactured social power. The faculty's behavioral shift proved equally revealing. Teachers who had previously ignored Chiaki's raised hand now called on her first, their voices taking on a deferential tone that bordered on obsequious. The art teacher who had failed to investigate the sabotage of Chiaki's project now offered private studio time after school. The headmaster, who once dismissed bullying as social dynamics, began personally greeting Chiaki each morning with inquiries about her family's well-being. During a particularly transparent example of this newfound deference, Mr. Harlow invited Chiaki to lead the advanced literature discussion on Great Expectations, noting that her unique perspective on wealth and identity would benefit the class. Chiaki accepted with her characteristic poise, but redirected the conversation away from her personal circumstances and toward Dickens' exploration of moral wealth versus material prosperity. A subtle but pointed commentary on the very dynamics unfolding at Westlake. Behind the scenes, Westlake's administrative offices buzzed with activity as the school board hastily revised policies on bullying and social inclusion, aware that the Leo family's influence extended far beyond the campus boundaries. The trustees, many of whom oversaw corporations with business ties to Leo International Holdings, scheduled an emergency session to discuss implementing a character education initiative that would address the toxic culture that had flourished under their negligent watch. For Chiaki, the academic challenges of Westlake now paled in comparison to the social isolation she navigated daily. Former allies crossed hallways to avoid her, conversations halted when she approached, and group project assignments became exercises in silent rejection as classmates requested transfers to other teams. The isolation grew more profound when her family received an eviction notice, the final collapse of the financial house of cards they had maintained for years. That evening, as the Lin family gathered around their dining table, discussing which possessions could be sold quickly, their phones simultaneously chimed with an alert. The family's legal counsel had received notification that Leo International Holdings had approved a comprehensive debt restructuring plan that would allow them to retain their home and provide a pathway to financial recovery. The documentation cited other than charity, with no mention of the connection between the two families' daughters. Chiaki stared at the message on her father's phone, understanding the unstated truth. Chiaki had interceded on their behalf without fanfare or public acknowledgement. The gesture contained no hint of gloating or demands for gratitude, just a quiet extension of assistance when it was most needed. It was a form of power Chiaki had never considered, the ability to help without expectation of recognition. 2 weeks after Founders' Day, school administrators announced the formation of a new student ethics committee, dedicated to addressing campus culture and promoting inclusion. The committee would report directly to the Board of Trustees, with authority to recommend policy changes and educational initiatives. When the list of committee members circulated, Chiaki's name appeared as chair, with an open invitation for interested students to apply for remaining positions. What surprised the student body wasn't Chiaki's leadership role, but rather her first appointed member, Lin Jiajia. The selection triggered immediate speculation. Was this a punishment disguised as opportunity, a public humiliation, or something else entirely? During their first closed-door committee meeting, Chiaki addressed the question directly. "Your perspective is essential," she told Jiajia, as other committee members listened. "You understand the mechanisms of exclusion because you mastered them. That knowledge, redirected toward building rather than destroying, can help create meaningful change." Jiajia's initial resistance to the appointment gradually transformed as she immersed herself in the committee's work. For the first time, she applied her strategic thinking to something beyond social manipulation, discovering that her understanding of influence could serve a purpose beyond self-advancement. The committee developed a peer mediation program, anonymous reporting systems for bullying incidents, and inclusion initiatives that specifically addressed economic diversity. One evening, as Jiajia and Jiachia reviewed proposals for the committee's next initiative, Jiajia offered the perspective that would fundamentally reshape Jiajia's understanding of her world. "True wealth isn't what you own or display," she said, her voice carrying the weight of inherited wisdom. "It's having the power to change things and choosing to use that power with compassion." The statement hung between them, bridging their disparate experiences. For Jiajia, it represented her grandfather's philosophy that had guided her approach to her family's fortune. For Jiajia, it illuminated the fundamental error in her previous value system, equating worth with possessions rather than possibilities. As weeks passed, Westlake transformed. The committee's work began influencing daily interactions, with students developing a new awareness of inclusion and exclusion patterns. Freshman orientation now included ethical leadership components, and the administration implemented anonymous scholarship processes to prevent identification of students receiving financial aid. Jia's transformation proved the most remarkable. The girl who once cataloged classmates' designer possessions now focused on identifying isolated students and creating connection opportunities. She worked with younger students struggling with social anxiety, recognizing in their fears her own desperate need for validation. Where she had once leveraged social capital to elevate herself, she now used her understanding of social dynamics to elevate others. For her part, Chiaki balanced her newfound public role with continued personal humility. She declined the designated parking space offered for her bicycle, rejected attempts to create preferential scheduling for her classes, and maintained her focus on academic excellence rather than social positioning. When approached about leveraging her family connections for various campus initiatives, she redirected conversations toward merit-based evaluations of each proposal. During a campus forum on educational equity, Chiaki watched Jiachi address questions about privilege with nuanced understanding. The audience listened intently as Jiachi articulated her belief that privilege creates responsibility rather than entitlement, a perspective Jiachia was only beginning to comprehend through her committee work. By semester's end, both girls had undergone fundamental transformations. Jiachia had stepped into leadership without sacrificing her authentic self, demonstrating that power and humility could coexist. Jiachia had begun the difficult work of rebuilding her identity around substance rather than appearance. Discovering that genuine connections provided security her previous social network never could. As the final chapter of our story closes, we're reminded that true wealth manifests not through designer labels or luxury cars, but through the character we display when we believe no one important is watching. Liu Jiajia's journey reveals how concealing her wealth allowed her to forge genuine connections based on who she truly was, not what her family possessed. Meanwhile, Lin Jiajia's transformation came through the painful stripping away of her fabricated status, forcing her to confront her authentic self. The psychological truth emerges clearly. Facing adversity often cultivates resilience and empathy, while those shielded from hardship struggled to develop these essential qualities. In the end, both girls received exactly what their actions deserved. Chiaki's deception led to her downfall, affirming that authentic character will always reveal itself in time.